Good morning. We are beginning a study of the book of Proverbs in our Bible classes and on Sunday mornings. On Sunday mornings, we are going through Proverbs 1 through 9. I will actually be preaching on the text of Proverbs 1 through 9. And on Wednesday nights, Justin Paget and I are going through the topics that we see in the Proverbs of chapters 10 through 31, kind of a random collection of Proverbs. And so the best way we felt to go through them would be to approach them topically. And that's our course of study for Wednesday nights. Since I'm going to be preaching through the text of Proverbs 1 through 9, I thought I could do a short video. Don't know if I'll do this every week or if we'll just do it here and there, but I wanted to work through the text. And this is a good way to study by kind of marking it up, knowing what's going on, making notes about what the author is doing, noting the parallelism in the text. We see this very clearly in the book of Proverbs, and I think if we can see what's going on in the text, then we can sometimes have a better understanding of the meaning of some of these proverbs and some of these things that the wise man is saying. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of walk through the first 7 verses, which I'll be preaching on this Sunday. I'd like to walk through these verses with you, and you can make some notes in your workbook on lesson 3. So let's just begin by reading the text. Very basic start here. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. This is a passage that we know fairly well. We've read it numerous times, but I just want to look through the Hebrew poetry and make some notes about what's going on inside the text here. The first line is very simple. We have our title and we have our author. We are looking at the Proverbs of Solomon, further designating himself the son of David, king of Israel. We know his reputation with wisdom. We know his connection with the wisdom from God and the request he made of God. In another video, we looked at the different types of parallelism. And you have synonymous parallelism when the author is saying the same things using the same kind of language. We have also antithetical parallelism when the author is saying the same thing but using opposite language. And we have instances of both here in this passage. And so I've used the color blue to denote synonymous parallelism, and then the color red to denote antithetical parallelism. In your text, in your workbook, you can use whichever colors or mark this however you would like to mark it. This just made sense to me to use those colors. I'm going to use the color green for something else we'll see here in just a minute. So let's look at this first pair here. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight. I think you see how these two lines go together, how they match up, how they are parallel. And so what we notice is the goal here to know or to understand. You see how those terms line up. And then likewise, wisdom and instruction line up or parallel the phrase words of insight. And so if you are thinking about this, the first part of the first line is an A. The second part is a B. And it matches up with the A and the B of the second line. So we have an A, B pattern. And I hope with the colors and the way that I've used the lines and the boxes, you can see how these lines are parallel, how these phrases work together. Now, the next two verses do not work in the same way. In fact, these verses build on one another, and they kind of continue the thought of the previous phrase, maybe a type of synonymous parallelism as they build on one another. So for this one, I've used a green arrow because I think it helps us to understand that we're continuing. We're building this line. So we have to receive instruction in wise dealing, and we're going to continue that in righteousness, justice, and equity. And so I think what we have here are some social goals. We don't want to just mark up the text. We want to make some notes on the text. What are we talking about here? And I think we can see that there are some social goals here. We are talking about justice and things that we see around us, right conduct. And we see how we can benefit with wisdom in these regards. The next verse is going to do the same thing, to give prudence to the simple. We're going to continue that, build on that, knowledge and discretion to the youth. This one, we probably could have marked this one with blue as well, but we only have the one verb in the first part of the verse, so I just did the green arrow as well. And what we have here are maybe some personal goals. As an individual, I want to gain prudence, I want to gain knowledge and discretion. Now let me say, I don't think that these two things are completely different from one another, that they can't overlap. That's not my point at all. I'm just kind of making some general statements about these two verses here. The next line is going back to the synonymous parallelism, so we can mark it. Let the wise. Notice how that matches with the one who understands. And those two lines go together. Likewise, to hear and increase in learning parallels the idea of obtaining guidance. And so again, we have this A-B pattern. So we go one more, we see another of this kind of building on one another to understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. We continue this thought. We're growing this thought here, kind of maybe more on the academic side of what we're trying to understand here. We want some insight into some of these difficulties. So maybe I should have labeled this academic goals here. And then we get to the motto, if you will, of the book of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The term but has been added in many versions there to note how this is a contrast here, and so we're looking at antithetical parallelism here, and we see that the fear of the Lord is going to parallel the idea of fools, and we see that the beginning of knowledge is going to parallel the wisdom and instruction. So we see the same truths, but presented first positively and then negatively. We see the fear of the Lord as the beginning of knowledge. That's good and wonderful and great. However, but on the other side of that, fools despise wisdom and instruction. And so we can make a couple of notes about this. They all apply to this last phrase here. We see again this A-B pattern. Now that's not always the case throughout the Proverbs. Sometimes we're going to see an inverse structure, an A-B-B-A pattern. We'll note that when we come to a passage with that. And we see that this is really the motto of the book, the introduction here. He's not wasting words. These aren't pleasantries here. He is building to the purpose of this book, and now we have the motto. It's very interesting that we start the book with this phrase, the fear of the Lord, because we're going to see it again at the end of this section in chapter 9 as he kind of completes his lectures to his son. We see this phrase again, and then at the end of the book, it says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord. And so we even end the book with this phrase as well, much like the book of Ecclesiastes ends with this phrase, fear the Lord and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man. This is kind of what I have in mind for our workbooks as we work through the lessons for Sunday. Again, these were intended to be Bible class lessons, but with COVID, we're not having Bible classes, so we're going to kind of approach it from a different point of view in our sermons. But I would still love for you to work through the text. I'd like to work through it with you in these short little videos. Just mark up the text a little bit. See what's going on. Find something. You don't have to use these colors, these markings, these notes, but work with the text. Think about what's going on. Think about how Solomon is building his argument here and how that helps us better understand what is going on. Again, this is not the marking up here is not the ultimate goal. We want to understand what he's saying and what's going on. But I think maybe some of these markings can help us better appreciate the structure and therefore help us better understand. That's the goal. And of course, we will talk about this more on Sunday. This, I understand, is very technical. We will not approach it like that on Sunday in our sermons. Don't worry, the sermon's not going to be, a long lecture on Hebrew poetry. That's not what I'm going to do. This is for the more technical side of things. And then on Sunday, we will think about how we can storm our will to do what God would have us to do from these passages. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions about it, send me a message. Let me know. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. I love doing this kind of thing, kind of the geek nerd in me. And so I hope that you will participate in this and enjoy this as well. We'll see you next time as we begin to approach chapter 2. Thank you.